Hello, and welcome to Hammering the Point, Warhammer40K. Hello, and welcome to... Son of a bitch. Hello, and welcome to Hammering the Point, a Warhammer40K podcast. I am your host, Warboss Toon Smasher, here with my co-hosts,
Electro Priest Jack,
and the Commissar.
And today's episode is sponsored by The Warp. Warp it to ya. Warp around it. Warp your teammates. Warp your style. Whatever you do, just warp it. Warp!
Also, be careful with the warp because there's demons.
Plenty of demons to fight.
That's like the disclaimer for the warp. That's the side effects at the end of that pill prescription.
It is.
May eat your soul.
Nah, but so the warp itself. So what is the warp? The warp, we kind of covered it a little bit back in our timeline episodes. So the warp started. All right, hang on. Everyone's fucking distracting me here.
So yeah, we're all playing with shit. When did the warp start?
It was always there.
It was always
so
there.
the warp is basically the reflection of the material realm and its living people. So it's just a mirror image. It's
right.
Just a psychic field.
Right.
As long as life exists, the warp exists.
Okay, so it isn't just psychically attuned life; it's all life.
Pretty much.
It is all life because, well, honestly, going on that note, the warp itself balances off of everyone's emotions.
Right.
So, like, when you're in the warp, everything's basically heightened.
Well, no.
And that's how the demons can kind of find you.
Not really. It's more like our thoughts and feelings corrupted the warp.
Yeah, because the warp...
Due to our negative emotions.
That's right.
Because the warp had started after the first war with the old ones.
The warp was always there.
Well, yeah.
There were things bumping around in the warp.
Yeah, because it was
way
the spirit
before
realm before it all got fucked
Well,
up.
no, even then, like, the warp has always existed. And as the sentient races started having other feelings and thoughts, and since a lot of the races have psychic abilities, they started slightly warping the warp to have certain thoughts and ideas. And the more that they believed it, the more those ideas became actual entities. But the warp has always existed, and there were various predators within it that would prey on these psychers, because that's how it works. So
because things just inevitably evolved to that.
Pretty much.
So yeah, I think.
Oh, yeah.
I think what it's War Boss or War Chief?
War Boss.
Okay, sorry.
War Boss!
War Chief is one of my characters in my D&D campaign. So
That's right.
yeah, so War Boss was saying something about the you called it the spirit realm.
Well, it was the spirit realm back.
Yeah, I think
That's
that was
what they
just,
called it
That's
before
right.
it was.
Before.
But it has always
It
been
is
the
always
warp.
there.
Right, the warp is always okay. It's fair enough. Okay, we're on the same page.
Because it all got fucked up during that big war since so many souls had went through. Just
Yeah,
like I
which
said,
war?
just
Which
fucked
war
it
was
up.
that?
That was the War in Heavens.
Okay,
And it wasn't really
we
the
all remember
souls that
one.
went there. It was more like it was just all the massive negative emotions between all the sides that started causing the warp to start, in a sense, making infantile chaos gods.
Woo! No demons yet, or
Yes.
Proto-demons?
proto-demons? I'm down with
But
that.
most of it was the psychic vampires that were killing off the old ones that existed in the warp.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Because they kind of like fled in there, and that's how they're able to attack.
They should make that into an army
Well,
of psychic vampires.
there was a every time one of the old ones would use their psychic powers, it would draw one of them closer, and if you use it too much or if you open warp rifts, they could possibly come in and start killing. And that's what happened to the old ones, was that they messed around and found out. But yeah,
sucks to suck.
yeah, pretty much. And
Basically.
as time went on, there was more negative emotions, and people started attributing certain things to certain ideals, like war gods and stuff, and that started the transition of the identity of the dark gods, so to speak.
Because they led up to the actual Chaos Gods after that.
Pretty much. It was more like they were all in their infantile state during the
they were basically
War in
like,
Heaven.
Like, think of it as they were like gestating. They were like
Pretty much.
like, in the womb of the warp.
Pretty much, like, the more ideals of it, and then, like, what really pushed it over was, like, a lot of the wars that was happening with the humans. The Black Plague also helped Nurgle kind of kickstart and start doing that whole thing.
So why do we mess with it, even though it's so dangerous and
it's
crazy?
because it's one of the only places. Okay, so the reason why they mess with it is because that's where psychers come from and where they draw their powers, and also because that's one of the only ways to travel long distances safely. So that's why they mess with it.
That's
and
right.
Also because humans like to poke at things because we don't know any better.
Well, of course.
We got to poke it. We got to poke at them in order to know what to do. Doesn't matter if 5,000 people die, right?
Yeah, no. Curiosity will always be our biggest strength and flaw.
This is true because for the space travel itself, so like anybody can basically travel through real space, like as long as you have a ship and a captain and someone who knows how to fucking fly, you can go anywhere. But for warp travel itself, the ship also has to be equipped with at least 3 things, which is, let me read here on my little notepad.
There's a warp engine, a Geller field, and I believe a navigator.
Yep.
Yeah. So the warp engine is what helps ships tear open the fabric of reality and dump themselves into the warp for travel.
Because that's also what powers them in order to move inside the warp as well.
Pretty much. It's just kind of like a secondary engine that helps them move through the warp.
Right, because the warp is like an ocean is what we decided to go with. It's very much torrented with ebbs and flows and waves and different strands.
Exactly, because when you jump into the warp, you can go into somewhere calm, you can go into somewhere rough.
It's spiritual energy almost. But
it's pretty much just like thoughts and ideas.
Yeah, in a physical energy. So that's
it's basically like a pocket dimension, but not.
Yeah, well, the webway is a pocket dimension.
Yeah.
The warp, and the webway is the safe way to get through the warp, but we don't do that yet because we can't.
Yeah.
We fucked that up.
Yeah, during the Horus Heresy, that's what really happened. But basically, you could tell the navigators, which are a special kind of psyker that are bred to do this. They have entire households of it. And they can actually tell whether the warp is going to be calm or not. So, like, sometimes they will be like, oh, well, the warp is really bad and it's, like, not really good for traveling, so they'll hold off for a bit to see if it calms down. So, like...
Because they can view into the void from no matter where they are.
Pretty much. They have a third eye that's actually just dead center on their forehead.
I'm not sure who stole from who, but for all you Dune fans with the new movie coming out... they have the same thing for the Dune Spice navigators. They have, like, it's the same concept. It's hilarious. It's the exact same thing. Jeez, cats.
My cats are so mad that they cannot come in the room with us.
But yeah, so that's and the Geller field. We haven't really gone over the Geller field.
We haven't, but I feel like the Navigator needs a little more on that because the Navigator himself, like how the Commissar had said, they are bred for that, and there's different households. Because a lot of these Navigators literally, since they are bred for the job, they're literally stuck in the ship right in that room, and it's not it's not like food is handed to them, but food is handed to them because they need to solely focus on going like through the warp and making sure that they don't lose sight of anything, because since they can still see into the void, they of course can still be attacked, which is why they rely heavily on the Geller field that does surround the ship.
Well, yes and no. Usually in the navigator's room, it's psychically warded, so it's the safest place in the entire ship usually.
Oh, it is.
So
it's just usually they still have to make sure they're always on guard. Because a lot of these, because when you're traveling through the warp, talking about the Geller field, basically imagine a bubble surrounding the ship that's traveling through the warp. The Geller field itself is like kind of like a safety field around the ship. So imagine the ship is a giant ship light out in the ocean. You're traveling through the fog, and the brighter you see the light, you're going to be like, hey, what's that? I'm going to travel to it. Whereas the dimmer the light, you're not really going to notice it. I'm just saying, because the demon's kind of seeing the ship inside of the warp.
And no. The demons could still see the ship just fine. It's just the field itself that's keeping them out. It doesn't dampen them in any way. It just is a force that encompasses the ship and protects it while it's going through. So, the demons can still see it, but they just can't get into it. So,
right,
yeah, and
just because what I was reading on that, the reason I was saying kind of it's like that dim light, because a lot of times the crewmen, since the demons feed off of people's emotions, they didn't want too much hustle and bustle on the ship to kind of draw attention to themselves.
Well,
so
yeah,
I was also reading up that they would keep a lot of the crewmen inside of their quarters to try and hide but not. But then if they also got boarded by demons and something happened, because glitches can happen, if a Geller field even glitches for a second, who knows how many demons can escape
a lot of ships they just innately shut off all the windows. They have these screens that they just slam down so the crew can just continue doing, because they need a lot of that stuff needs constant monitoring.
Oh yeah,
monitoring.
Yeah. And so basically that needs constantly just being looked at. So they have these shields that slam down up over the windows, and the crew can just continue to work and be just fine, because what really elicits the emotions is when the screens are open and you can look into the warp. So that a lot of times they will just close it off and let the navigators use the what's that thing?
The thought on that one real quick, because since the navigator's looking through, do I need to scroll down on here real quick? We have some notes looking over, folks, real quick. Bear with
Astronomicon.
us. Yes.
They use that to guide everything. That's the embodiment of the Emperor. That's a part of the Emperor's soul. It shines so bright that that's what they use to navigate.
Did he give it up willingly?
Yes, because he's trapped in the Golden Throne, and since when he got punted down by Horus,
right,
when he got put into the chair, his soul fractured.
Oh, so where did they find pieces of his soul? Just in the warp?
One was just chilling above Terra, so they used that to navigate as a focal point to go, okay, this is where Terra is.
That is so
this
crazy.
is
No matter
we're
where
going
they
now.
are in the galaxy,
they
can always see the beacon to Terra.
Yeah.
That's how they're always kind of able to navigate home.
Which is excellent. Thank you, God Emperor.
The Emperor's pretty alright by the orcs.
It's only because he could beat your ass.
Put up a good fight. Just like that Yark.
But 3 out of the countless races use the warp for travel. It's the orcs, it's the chaos, and it's the humans. 2 of them use Geller fields, or at least one version of the Geller field. The orcs have a ramshackled version that they believe to work, and since orcs work off belief, it works. And then humans also use it, but chaos can freely go in between the warp and the chaos. Warp and the normal realm just fine without Geller fields, because they already have pacts with the demons to allow them to. And they don't really care if demons jump onto their ship while they're traveling through the warp, because it doesn't bother them, because they won't mess with them too badly.
If it is, it's just all in good fun, I imagine.
Yeah, it depends on the Chaos Legion. The Iron Hands, I think they use Geller fields because they view Chaos Corruption as something not manly, in a sense.
Ha!
But
they're your will's been overpowered. That's gay.
pretty much.
Essentially, yeah, because they'll use Geller fields I don't remember what or I read on that, but I remember sometimes they'd have the Gellerfields down to at least intense in a fight. If they were looking
That's
over to
orcs.
take. No, I do. So the orcs, a lot of that. So the orc ships that do travel through the warp, the orcs themselves usually end up taking over anyone else's ship.
Yep.
And the reason it travels through is kind of like Commissar said, the belief in there helps make it afloat, but a lot of the mechs kind of run it and grunts run around. It does help if there is a weird boy on board, because essentially to the orcs, a lot of people stay away from the weird boys, but if they're there, they believe that they can travel through anywhere, essentially, since the weird boy can protect them with the bubble.
The bubble.
The bubble. And a lot of times the orcs, how they just, like Commissar said, they do ramshackle through. And if demons board their ship, they definitely don't resist. They love the fight.
Well, that's...
Yeah,
Not
and then the other races, they have their own version of travel. The slowest out of all of them are the Tyranid and the Tau, because the Tau don't really have access to opening the warp rifts because they don't have psychers in their society. So
Because they use a lot of real-time space travel.
yeah, they do. They're just slightly faster at real-time travel than humans and
pretty much
everybody else.
yeah.
That's one of the only reason why they've only cut out like a small amount of the galaxy and only allows them to travel between those planets. The Tyranids, they slingshot themselves off of suns with their gravity. They will get close enough to either planets or suns, and they will, in a sense, slingshot themselves. They would go around it, and then right when they're about to dip into it, they would shoot out at extreme speeds. And that's pretty much how they keep themselves going, is that they just slingshot themselves across the space. And,
Yeah, the stupid slow
and they can't
Leviathans.
enter the warp because their hive mind is such a massive psychic presence that it kind of shuts the warp down for a bit as they're passing through real space.
Which, yeah, that's why they're a gigantic blank splot on maps.
I'm not entirely sure on the Necron's way of travel. I think they have jump gates more than anything else.
Necrons, since they had high advanced technology back from when they were fighting the old ones, they kind of... It's essentially like ripping a hole in space and jumping through. It's like the warp travel, but not. I do know some dynasties have made it through the warp, traveling after some enemies, because a lot of the times, a lot of Necrons will use their own technology to travel in.
So yeah, they in a sense they can move so fast without entering the warp, because they have
They probably have metal bodies, but
oh yeah, because of the metal bodies, but it's the
they use inertialless.
Yeah.
So because they have metal bodies and they aren't organic, they can literally make themselves zero mass and not have any.
That's how they're
negative
able
side
to get a
effects.
lot of their. It's the big floating ships that they use. I'm staring.
monolith.
Tech Priest, can you please hand me the Necron
Are you
Codex?
talking about the monolith?
I think, yes, the monolith. Because a lot of times the monolith itself is a travel gate, quote unquote. Yeah, because it says here, a monolith is capable of skimming across the battlefield or even descending from space. It can slaughter foes with its array of potent weapons, blah, blah, blah. Okay, I'm not reading that quite part, but basically...
They can move, well, at the speed of light, because they can accelerate close to the speed of light or faster than light travel. So they don't need to pop into the warp. Their engines are just so advanced that they just
zip straight on
zip
through.
towards whatever they need to go to.
Because they can go into the warp, because a lot of the times the only ones that actually utilize the warp is the... I hate forgetting names. Is the death marks. Because a lot of times the death marks will go into the warp to track down foes and enemies that they've targeted. So no matter where you go, even in the warp, the death marks can see you. That's how advanced their technology is.
Jealous. Speaking of great technology, just because it's important, we're kind of skipping over it. The Eldar have
I
these
was going to
little...
talk to them.
Oh, good.
here
Yeah,
soon.
because they got the dang stones that
Yeah.
protect them from the warp. Because
the warp stones,
we've been
right?
we've been talking about how the warp eats
they
souls.
have- well, yes and no.
The demons eat the souls.
Yeah, so like the Eldar are a special case because they have these things called soul stones, and it stops Slaanesh from inheriting their souls, because that's the entirety of why Slaanesh is
Yeah.
existing, is because the Eldar birthed them into reality.
They had such
and
a nice
something
orgy.
weird happened while they birthed it. Slaanesh ganged the natural ability of sucking all of the Eldar souls up, no matter what.
Oh wow, yeah, okay.
So
So they're like
they
connected.
developed-
When they die, they immediately gets their soul.
Pretty
Unless
much,
they're protected by
and they
the
have
warp
these
stone.
things called soul stones.
Soul stone.
And as soon as they die, their soul gets sucked into this stone. But the Eldar have their way of travel, and it is called the Webway, and they inherited it from the Old Ones because they were the inheritors of the Old Ones. They basically, a lot of their ships have the innate ability to access the Webway. They try to do everything in their power to stay away from the warp and going into the warp.
The warp is a very dangerous place for super psychically attuned creatures such
It
as
is.
Oh, yeah, 'cause
So
it's
they
big brain time, big chow time.
have this thing called, well, as I said, the Webway, and it is a tunnel between the immaterial and the material realm. And that's how they use to travel, and they have so many different link points throughout the galaxy because
they
the
were set up
old
a long time
ones set up
ago.
those
before conflict was an issue.
pretty much, and that's how they stay away from the traveling of the warp.
Because they physically make their own webway gates. Right?
Yeah, well, they at least try to. They try to keep the ones that are still together because a lot of them have lost the knowledge or the necessary ability to make those webways. So,
Because there's only like a handful of those gateways left, isn't there? 'Cause
yeah,
they're
a
only
lot
on
of them
few-
are located on their
planets?
craft worlds, which are synthetically made moving arc ships that are the size of worlds.
Beautiful.
And,
Oh,
that's where a
right.
lot of them are located.
So
there
they are
are
ships.
Yeah, they're called craft worlds.
Well, I knew the craft. I didn't.
Yeah, they're giant, just moving ships. They just kind of lazily float through space. They're so big that like a lot of people can't really like actively hurt them because of how
yeah.
big they are. And like there
I mean,
are a
they
few
got their
that
own
have
little
been
ecosystem.
destroyed by Tyranids. Orcs have tried to do some damage to them. The Imperium usually, like, if they see it, they will attack it, but they don't actively seek it because they're always consistently on the move. So, yeah, and
Fair
they
enough.
act as an epicenter for the webway gates because they're constantly moving. So they will actively travel between these things, and that's how they stay in communication.
So they try and keep everyone together on that.
Pretty much. And then there's the Dark Eldar who actively use the webway, but their
So they
entire
live in the
civilization
webway.
is in the webway. And then there's another group of Eldar who don't do that, and they're called the Exarts, and they basically want to go back to a primal-esque sense. So they kind of live with dinosaurs. They live on these primal planets and everything, and they don't do a lot of travel, and they just kind of shun the other two groups of Eldar. They're, in a sense, your space elves or your space wood elves.
Yeah.
Didn't they work with the Inari at all?
Not really.
Only in extreme circumstances.
The Inari are kind of a weird sect that only really recently showed up. They're a part of the Dark Eldar, technically, because they worship the Death Guard. But the Exarts, they're just kind of like, we just want to be left alone. So they're like, we'll work with you if it helps us, but we won't actively do anything
yeah,
with
there
you
won't be
guys.
any support.
Yeah.
Okay, gotcha.
And the Inari are mostly working with the Craft World Eldars because they have the biggest populations and the biggest centers of the Soul Stones.
Okay,
So,
because they still use the webway, right, or no?
Yes and no. they're usually pretty just like, okay, we're here. We want to worship nature and be left alone.
Okay, fair enough.
So
Wherever you are, you're there.
pretty much.
Yeah. Philosophy.
Well, that was neat.
Yeah, I mean,
That was
unless
pretty
we
cool.
want to.
Well, because essentially when you're in the warp, you also need to be careful because when you are traveling through the warp, kind of jumping back some topics a little bit ago, there's warp storms that can happen through when you're traveling as well.
Oh, yeah.
And those basically, I'm going to make another ocean reference on that because imagine those boys are intense as all hell, and they can send a ship spiraling.
It's a hurricane.
Basically.
A mega hurricane.
A mega hurricane of the spiritual essence, and that is no good.
That's the thing about warp storms is they don't only affect the warp, they also affect the
the
material
real
realm.
time outside as well.
And it usually happens when there's a chaos incursion because there's so much negative energy and there's so much chaos energy
Oh, yeah,
that
but
it
are there
rips a
not
hole.
Smaller ones that just
There
like,
are
There
the
are, but a
Eldar.
lot of them
The
are-
Eldar can
more just
can
like
summon
normal ebb and flow.
warp storms because how psychically powerful they are. They can
Nice.
they can cause it to
But they
cast
don't-
enemies away.
They don't usually do that unless it's like a dire circumstance because, well, depending on how close to a craft world they are, if it's any other race that they're close to that's not the Eldar, they're not going to give a fuck and they're going to do it.
Well, yeah,
But if it is kind of close,
they
to,
won't do any of that in their craft worlds because that's their worlds.
Oh, yeah.
But,
Of
like
course.
if they're fighting on a planet they're trying to take, they will open a warp storm to cause. They usually do it to manipulate the other factions into acting, so the other factions can do their dirty work.
Nice. No,
Like
that's
in
excellent.
the game Dawn of War 2, the reason why the Eldar are actively harassing the orcs in that game is because a big enough wog can hold off a Tyranid hive fleet. So they are basically, in a sense,
trying
amping
to
the
rally all
orcs
the
up
orcs together in the
to act up and start a wog so they can, in a sense, distract the
Oh, that's right. I remember
Tyranids
reading that story.
Yep.
from whatever the Eldar wanted to do at that point. So
Right. Yeah, no, they always
So now they
got
were wanting to take
schemes.
that stellar base, right?
yes and no,
it was
it's
like-
weird.
I enjoyed the game. It was fun. as
It's
hell.
just the
But
the Eldar are always the most straightforward of what they want, and
No,
what they need.
they're
So
very-
it's
they
just,
always playing the long game.
well, yeah,
Well,
pretty
they
much
always play the long game to
because
try
they
and-
can see the future. Like
Yeah.
all of their Farseers can literally just look into the future. So while all the other races are sitting there and living within the now, the Eldar have already seen 100 years into the future in every single thing that they need to see. So they
ridiculous.
are actively playing the.
Too bad I didn't see Slanesh come in, huh?
Well, they saw. Actually, that's funny. They did, and that's one of the reasons why the craft worlds were created to begin with.
Oh, it was a secret project.
Pretty
away
much,
from the
a
rest
lot of them were getting too rowdy with the orgies, and
Yeah.
a lot of them started breaking off and became the craft worlds because they saw that stuff coming.
and was like, all right, we need.
And
to
as
stop.
they were getting the ones who didn't want to do the orgy fests anymore off this planet, and that's also one of the reasons why the Dark Eldar exists to begin with, is because they want to go back to their old ways that birthed Slanesh,
Right.
and
Yeah,
they
I do
don't
remember
have
that
soul
much.
stones.
Nope.
No.
What they get their power from is torment.
Yeah, okay.
The more they torture, the longer they live.
Oh, okay. And that's a gift from Slanesh, I'm guessing.
It acts like the soul stone. In a sense, it just keeps them to themselves, and it's weird.
Huh.
Yeah. So yeah, some of them did see the birth of Slanesh, and they tried everything in their power to get that stuff done and over with. And that's one of the reasons why the craft world exists in the first place, is because they were like, we need to stop this.
Well, and that's the power of the warp. It gives you fucking magic time travel vision.
Pretty much. And so, and one of the craft worlds actually didn't get out in time and got caught up in that warp rift. And the webways are actually still open to that craft world.
Right.
And they will actively send small parties of soldiers and other smaller farseers into exploring it to get relics from that world,
Oh.
or to learn certain things about their past.
Too bad they can't just pull it out.
Well, they've tried and it fails because it's such a massive.
And it's probably been in there so long.
Yeah,
now.
pretty much. It's been there
Part
for
of
like
that
almost
realm.
like 10,000 years, because this all happened way.
Oh, of course.
Before.
Everything with the Eldars 10,000 years ago.
Back in my day when I remembered this like 2 days ago, we
My
did this.
Children's children saw this, bitch.
Well, yeah, not really. Eldar are so long lived that a lot of them still remember that.
That's what I'm.
And
that's
like,
what we're
they
making
don't
fun of.
breed as much.
No, I know they don't.
Which
They
is-
don't need to.
Yeah.
So I know if you use it, if you don't use it, you lose it. But if you use it constantly, it's gonna
Pretty much.
pretty
And
much fuck you up.
And it's just like the old ones specifically designed them to be that way, to not have as many children.
Which, yeah, so they don't draw as much of a presence.
Yeah,
I
pretty
assume.
much. And it's just more like because they're so long lived that they just didn't need to make a lot of babies at the point. And now that they're considered a dying race, they have
Oops.
tried to make more Eldar. And like there's Eldar families and stuff like that.
they do succeed, but a lot of times they don't.
Pretty much. It's just like it's kind of like for every like 5 Eldar families, 2 of them will have kids. So
And isn't even out of that, like a lot of times it's like the 80-20 of just one child.
no, it's just they usually try to have as many as possible. But it's like any elf, really, ultimately, in any universe, they've always just struggled to have and keep their population. It's like the token elves, how like they live forever, but it's really hard for them to have babies. So
It's like they have like ritual magic. It gets ridiculous. But yeah, I besides
Because
maybe
the
like
time in... Sorry, what?
no, you're good. I was just gonna say I don't really have much else to add besides maybe major places that are in the warp. But it looked like you had more.
I was just going to say, because, like, for real space-time travel, like, of course, if you're leaving Terra and you say, we'll be gone a week, it'll take us a week to get there, it could be a week in, like, real space or even travel through the warp. But as soon as you go through, it could be 2 weeks or not. But when you travel through the warp, you could go in, it could be 5 minutes, it could be 5 years,
Oh.
it could be 5
didn't know that.
millennia,
yep.
depending on where you pop out.
And
Because
is-
your time in the warp is completely gone from anything on the outside.
And is that only if you don't have a Geller field, or
No, that's
including?
literally every time you
That's
jump
a
through the
risk.
warp. It is a high risk. That's why a lot of the times, like the navigators themselves are pretty good at being
Keeping
able to,
time.
Exactly, but that's why a lot of times too they run through and be like, hey, if we go through now, it's going to be rough.
Yeah.
If we go through now, it's going to be clear. They try and keep a hold of time on that notion.
Yeah.
But
That's
a
good.
lot of the times too, like as soon as you're knocked off course, oh yeah.
Whatever happens, happens. You're just lucky to be alive.
You could be in there in a minute. You could be in there 30 seconds. All of a sudden, it's fucking 10 millennia, and you're popping out.
And you're like, oh no, the horse heresy just happened. What?
Because there was a famous, like quote unquote famous ship that got lost in the warp, didn't it? And appeared with some guardsmen or something.
I think so.
I wouldn't be surprised if they had a story of a 30K ship appearing in 40K. That would be right on point with the series. Especially with warp space being that unpredictable. Like,
Oh yeah,
wow,
because you
it's crazy.
can literally get lost. That's what kind of follows back in through going to
Yeah,
the
it's
points of
basically-
the navigator and making sure that you have keen points when you're traveling through the warp.
Yeah, it's the last frontier of this universe. It's the final frontier. It's the only thing not settled, explored, tamed, and basically is
Exactly.
unable to be.
Because it's the realm
is
of
good.
chaos.
It's
as
the
well.
it's the Midwest. It's the wild Midwest.
It's the howdy ho.
God. No. Yeah. See, Commissar's allergic to it.
Nope.
Anyways.
I think that kind of does wrap it up a little bit.
Yeah, I mean the warp's luckily pretty straightforward for how absolutely wacky it is.
Yes and no.
Yeah.
The warp is warp.
The warp is the warp.
The warp is warp. It'll warp your mind.
It's
It'll warp people.
that freaking meme from, I think it's The Incredibles 2. Math is math. The warp is the warp. Yeah, good times. Well,
Hopefully you guys enjoyed this episode. Any thoughts, comments, anything else you'd like to touch us up on, or even comment on what we've commented on, email us at hammeringthepointpodcast@gmail.com. Hit us up on Facebook. We are live on YouTube, Spotify, and Google Podcasts.
thank you for listening. Thank you for listening.
I believe the hammer's been... The point has been hammered, gentlemen. God damn it. Gork and Mork, help me.
Yep.